And I'd like to remind you, for more Microsoft Webcasts, you can visit microsoft.com/webcast. Welcome again to today's TechNet Webcast, Introduction to Microsoft SQL Server 2005 Reporting Services. Today's presenter is John Weston, who's a TechNet presenter here at Microsoft. John, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Aurora. I appreciate it. Well, good morning or good afternoon to everybody, or good evening if you're watching this in a tape-delayed version of it. Welcome to the SQL Server 2005 Reporting Services. As Aurora said, my name is John Weston, and my email address here at Microsoft is pretty simple. It's john.weston, so W-E-S-T-O-N, at Microsoft.com. I also maintain a technical blog, and if you want to go out there to my technical blog, you can go see all kinds of great technical information, including some of the questions and answers from previous webcasts that I do. The webcast log, if you see at the bottom all the questions and answers, isn't always viewable on our downloads. So if you want to go up to my blog, you can take a look at the previous webcasts that I've done. That blog address is blogs.technet.com/jweston. Well, behind the scenes, if you ask any questions during the session, I've got two of my coworkers, Keith Combs and Brian Von Axelson, have volunteered to help me out with questions and answers during this session. So I really appreciate those guys helping out behind the scenes. So they're going to be there when you type in questions, and they'll help out, answer as many of those as they can during this session. And if those are ones they don't get to, I will make sure we get to at the end of the session. So answer your questions is on the bottom window by typing in the text. Well, let's dive right into what we're going to talk about today. In this session today, we're going to cover SQL Server 2005 Business Intelligence, or BI solutions. We'll take a look at what's new in reporting services over previous versions of reporting services. And then finally, we'll take a look at the report life cycle. We'll gain an understanding of the report life cycle. You'll see how to create, publish, and manage the delivery of reports using the new tools and features inside of SQL Server reporting services. At the end of the session, you should be ready to create and publish your own reports to enhance your organization's business knowledge of your information. Helpful experience that you may have are prereqs. If you're familiar with reporting services, great. Not a requirement. If you're familiar with analysis services in the .NET architecture, even better. And if you have experience with databases such as SQL Server, would be helpful as well. Again, not hard requirements. This is a level 200 course. So hopefully we'll try to reach a wide range of audience of people who have just a little bit of experience with this product, all the way to those to want to see some of the new features, and they've been using our previous versions for some time. So what's our agenda for this morning? First, we're going to dive in and take a look at SQL Server reporting services. We'll create and publish a report, and then we'll take a look at, if we get time to, delivering and managing those reports. So first off, let's dive into and take a look at what actually is reporting services, or what components make up reporting services. Reporting services is a server-based reporting platform that you can use to create, manage tabular, matrix, graphical, and free-form reports that contain data from regional and multidimensional data sources. These reports you can use to be viewed and managed over the web-based connection. The report server is the main component of those reporting services. It is implemented both as a Windows service and as a web service for processing and rendering reports. The Windows service provides initialization, scheduling, and delivering services, and the server maintenance. Through its subcomponents, the reporting service processes reports requests and makes reports available on on-demand access for scheduled distribution. We actually use that internally. We have an internal system built on SQL Server 2005, and I get it to email me a report every Friday of where I'm supposed to be next week. A report server subcomponents include processors and extensions. These processors are the hub of the report server. The processor supports an integral to the reporting system and cannot be modified or extended. Extensions are also processors, but they perform very specific functions. So let's add all the different layers we've got here on top of reporting services. First, the web service component exposes a set of programmatic interfaces. The client application can use this API to access report services. The services work together and constitute a single report server instance. Out-of-the-box integration exists with various Microsoft products, including Office and specifically Excel. The report server is a stateless server that stores all the properties, objects, and metadata in the SQL Server 2005 database. Stored data includes published reports, report models, and the folder hierarchy that provides the addressing for all items managed by the report server. A report server database can provide an internal storage for a single reporting service installation or for multiple report servers that are part of a scaled-out deployment of reporting services. Report server security extensions are used to authenticate and authorize users and groups to report server. The default security extension is based on the Windows authentication. You can also create your own custom security extension to replace the default security if your model requires it. Although part of SQL Server, reporting service also allows you to report on any type of data or databases, web service, flat files, and so on. It's not limited to just SQL Server data. Reporting services supports a variety of output formats. Reports initially displayed in HTML format, but after the report is rendered, you can then redisplay it in a different format such as Excel or in a PDF format. And finally, there are two ways to access and deliver reports. As many delivery targets are supported, subscription-based access automatically generates and delivers reports to a destination. You can deliver reports to an email inbox or a file share. On-demand access allows users to select reports from a report viewing tool such as a Report Manager, a Microsoft SharePoint web part, or a browser. So what's new in this version of SQL Server 2005 reporting services over previous versions? Many of the enhancements to the core reporting services product are improvements over the previous version or for customer feedback. This includes enhancements to the report design, processing, and interaction such as direct client printing, column sorting, multi-value parameters, and custom reporting items, an improved expression editor, and a new design features. There's also improvement to performance and scalability over previous versions. Integration with existing products is a key to reporting services. SQL Server 2005 reporting services provides enhanced integration with other components within SQL Server, as well as Microsoft Office and SharePoint products and other technologies. This includes Query Designer support for analysis services, analysis and integration services data sources, report management through SQL Server Management Studio, and new SharePoint web parts for exploring and viewing reports, which we'll see here in the first demonstration in just a few minutes. Visual Studio 2005, standard editions and later, are now included in report services functionality to enable developers to integrate local or remote reports directly into their applications, both with and without a report server. You can even use the ADO.NET dataset as a data source. And finally, the end user changes. Report services now extends its reach with an addition of the Report Builder, a new ad hoc report tool that enables business users to create their own reports and explore corporate data. Report Builder incorporates a new user-friendly business query model that enables users to build reports without deep technical understanding of the underlying data source. Enough of the slides. Let's take a look at the product. I want to spend most of our time today in demonstrations. We'll see how many I can get in an hour. In our first demonstration, we'll take a look at the new reporting features in SQL Server 2005 and view the various types of reports from an end user's perspective. So I've got a virtual machine environment set up here, and so this is a Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition server that I've installed SQL Server on, and I've configured report services to run on. So if I click on the little icon on the desktop here, the default report manager, notice this little window that comes up in the Explorer. If you don't have the icon automatically created on your desktop, notice the address that I'm going to is just localhost/reports. So all you need to know is the name of your SQL Server 2005, and if reporting services has been installed and configured, just go to that server name or IP address /reports, and you should get a web part here to and have access to the reports. So here's the sample reports. We're going to use the database AdventureWorks that comes with all versions of SQL Server 2005 as our data point. So we've got a SharePoint site here. Let's open up this report manager, and let's take a look at the AdventureWorks sample reports. So if I just click on the shortcut here, this should have the sample reports that are out there for me. So these are all ones that are built in, nothing new that I've created here. This all is out there new existing. All AdventureWorks reports have been updated for previous versions. Report Manager is just one way to view them. You could also view these through a SharePoint web part or through the browser directly. For example, you can have a report with a couple of different data regions, a table with a bar graph and a table with a chart. Let's take a look at the product line sales sample report. So notice now it's going out to SQL Server and generating the report. It's pretty quick, not too bad for this little laptop I'm running on here. So AdventureWorks is our typical bicycle company, and so they sell things like bicycles and clothes and accessories to those. So we see this first report here has both top employee data and top stores data, both representing a couple different types of graph of information. So let's take a look first at the reformatting of this report. In the top sales or top employee information, notice the date range I've got selected here for this is the whole year 2003, and I'm looking at road bikes. And this is sales sorted by employee. And so let's take a look at Jillian Carson. She's one of our employees here. So notice her name is also a hot link. So if I click on that, this is going to drill down inside of that $30 million that she did during that year. And I want to see some more detailed information about that. How does it compare with previous years? So now this drills down into our 2003 December sales report. And so I can see immediately by month and year-over-year comparison over previous years that Jillian has done. And allows me to take a look at how it's broken down by category. So as you can see, most of her revenue comes in from bicycles versus clothing or other components or accessories. And then now I see detail the individual sales orders that made up that information. This is all based on an OLAP cube, so it allows me to be able to drill down into lots of individual detailed information. So we started out the summary for the whole company, looking at things ranked by person, drilled down into one individual sales rep. We now see the individual orders for that person, and so I like to look at that one particular order I've got highlighted here. Order number SO58903. So let's take a look at the detailed sales for that information. So this is going to go off and run another detailed level. So here's the exact sales order 58903, and we can see what made up that order of $3,000. Okay, so it looks like she sold some components and some 54-centimeter bicycles here that made up the most bulk of that order. So looks like they bought a couple of really nice touring bicycles there that made up, and notice no discount on there, so a nice good margin, and we can see who the items were sold to. So let's go back to that original report. I just have to click back a couple of times in my browser, and it'll bring me back to the original report that we saw. I could have not only just clicked on the person's name, but I could have clicked on the bar graph over here, and it would have allowed me to drill into that same sales information. By default, the way I've created this report, or this default report, is sorted by sales revenue. I could reverse that instead of largest to smallest. If I want to see the smallest to largest, it can resort this information by clicking that little down arrow that's in the header next to the sales button. This is going to now go out and re-execute the report for me, but taking the new criteria that I've got selected within that. Okay, so now notice the smallest amount is on the top. What happens if I had a very large list of employees that did sales for me if I wanted to sort them by name? So here I can have this button tell it to sort the data by last name. And so now I can see it alphabetically by last name of the sales employees, not particularly ranked by individual dollar amounts. That's fine. This is the default settings. Notice the selections that I've got for the report up here at the top. By default, the category is bikes because that's where the majority of my revenue comes from. Let's say if we wanted to look at some of the other sales revenue, let's look at clothing information. And notice clothing has subcategories, okay? So I can see different types of subcategories. It'll take it a second for my subcategories to refresh here. There we go. And I don't want to look at all the clothing categories. Let's take a look at just a few of those categories. So let's look at jerseys, socks, and shorts, okay? So if I click on that, I'm going to leave it the same date range for right now. So I can, on the fly, select different categories here and subcategories within that category, and take a look at how the data has changed. So I clicked on View Report, and it has now come back and showing me the information on the clothing that people. Looks like Linda Mitchell is my top salesperson for the year 2003, of course, and of just information of the clothing, jerseys, shorts, and socks, not even the entire clothing line. I can also pick a different report. That's for the full year. What happens if I only want to see 6 months of the information? So I can pull this down here. Let's roll back in our calendar to the middle of year 2003. And we'll pick July 1st here. So now notice I'm only going from the 1st of January 2003 to the 1st of July 2003. Did I have to write a whole new report to do this? No. With the ability of this sample report we've got, I can now look at just the first half of 2003, and I'm looking at the clothing subcategories of jerseys, shorts, and socks, and I can see this is kind of interesting. Notice Linda is no longer the top person. She must have sold most of her stuff in the second half of the year, where Jillian Carson, our first salesperson that we took a look at, was the top person in the first half of 2003 in the clothing line, but something changed with Linda, and that she did very well in the second half of the year. So this is nice and informative to take a look at this in this type of reporting format. What happens if I wanted to print this information out? Now click on the little print icon that we've got here. Now, I can't remember if I installed a printer or not, so this may actually try to force us to install a printer. This has been greatly improved over previous versions of SQL Server. Enables you to do rich client printing. This was added as a previous service pack, so yeah, there it's going to want me to install a printer. Let's go through the processes of that. I can print directly from within this web browser. So I don't have a physical printer attached to this machine, so I'm going to click on Preview. This ability is done through an ActiveX control that's downloaded and installed the first time you use the print mechanism. This controls the type of functionality you want to print to rich client. So there we can see a preview of what we're going to do. Let's say I wanted to change the margins, for example. So if I click on the Margins button, and let's go ahead and add, let's say a 2.5-inch margin on the bottom. There we go. Okay, so all this is done inside the margin. So we can see now it's broken it down into a 2-page report because I've changed the margin on the bottom of the page. And let's go ahead and cancel out of that, so I don't want to physically report it. Now, if I want to get out of this individual report and go back to see all the sample reports that were there, let's explore another type of report. Let's take a look at the company sales. So to get back to that, I can go back to my SharePoint here by clicking on Adventures Sample Work Report. There we go. And this time we're going to take a look at this canned report out there called Company Sales. So now this report comes up. This is both rows and columns of data. This allows us to be able to expand this information. So for example, I want to expand components. Notice how it reformats my report. And I've got data for year 2002 and year 2003. So let's expand the 2003 column. And so now we can see by quarter all the individual components that we've sold throughout the year. As in SQL Server 2000, we support a variety of reporting formats such as XML, comma-separated TIFF files, PDFs, Web Archive, and Excel. We can render extensible models that allow third-party vendors to create their own formats. For example, we can use things like Office Writer. So let's take a look in Format List. So notice I can export this out to Excel, just to kind of give you an example of what this looks like. And I click on the Export button. It's going to offer to download this information, and I'm going to use, I'll go ahead and say Open. And I'll use a browser here to open it inside of Excel. There we go. So we're actually seeing a cell, and this is exactly cell. So cell K6 has the bottom bracket components for Q3 in the year 2003. So next, let's take a look at viewing reports in SharePoint and how we would configure SharePoint to do this type of information. Let me just open up a generic browser, and again, I'm just going to point back to this machine by typing in localhost. And let me go ahead and maximize that window so you can kind of see what I've got going on here. we're going to take a look in SharePoint and use both the Report Explorer and the Report Viewer web parts. We'll add these web parts to our SharePoint services as well as SharePoint portal services. So this will take just a second for this site to come up. We can find both these web parts that we want to add in the virtual server gallery, so I'll show you how to add that in just a second. You can add them with the Add button, or you can drag them using the Web Part Zone, and I'll demonstrate both of those here in just a second. All right, here we go. So here's my SharePoint services site. I'm going to go over here to the upper right-hand corner to modify this SharePoint. So I'll click on Modify Shared Page. And what do I want to do? I want to modify the shared web parts. This isn't really a SharePoint class, but just kind of give you an idea of what we want to do here. And let's do an add. Let's see, if I want to add a web part, yeah, let's do that. And we'll do Browse. And this should expose for us the virtual server gallery of all the virtual servers that we can add to this machine. So it'll take a little bit of configuration to walk you through the steps. But I always get asked that, hey John, you demonstrated that really cool thing in SharePoint and reporting services. How did you do that? So here's the way we do it. So now as I'm into SharePoint, I'm into modifying the SharePoint, and I'll click on Add Web Parts. And the one I want to pull from is Virtual Server Gallery. So notice there are two different choices there. I've got both the Report Explorer and the Report Viewer. Okay, so if I highlight on the Report Explorer and click on the Add button, notice the default setting here is the left, so it's going to add it to the left box. Take it just a second to add Report Explorer for us. And then I'll show you the drag and drop method. Okay, so there's Report Explorer, just got added for us on the left-hand pane of SharePoint. Report Viewer, I can just highlight it, take it over here, and we're going to drag it kind of right down here below Report Explorer. I want it above Announcements, but below Report Explorer. So now I'm going to get both Report Explorer and Report Viewer integrated into my SharePoint website. There we go. So we showed you through both the manual add method and through the drag and drop method, so we can add those settings to our SharePoint. So let's go ahead and clean up this a little bit. I don't need this site image, and I don't need the links web part, so we're going to go ahead and close both of those. So that'll give us a little bit more space to work with here. So now we need to configure these Report Explorer to use the settings that our SharePoint or our reporting services are using out there. So if I click down the little drop-down box here, and I want to modify this web part. So I now notice that the little yellow dotted line comes about. What component are we modifying? And so I'm configuring Report Explorer, and I need to point it to the Report Manager URL. So we're going to go http://localhost. Again, I could point it to any other SQL server if I wanted to. And remember, what was that URL? Localhost/reports. And let's modify appearance. I want to make sure that the width isn't too wide, so let's go ahead and limit that to 600 pixels. Yeah, we'll leave it as pixels. That looks good. And we now have our Report Explorer set up and configured the same way, the way we want it to work. Notice we've got Report Builder right off the menu now. It's known and exposed that for us. It creates us that launch button to Report Builder, which we'll use in the next demonstration. So here, let's view the same sample reports that you saw in the previous one through SharePoint. So I click on AdventureWorks Sample Reports, and a list of the AdventureWorks reports come up. So let's take a look at that company sales one. That's the same report we looked at in the last demonstration. So I click on the short link to it here. Notice it opens up a different window. Going to generate that report for us. And there we go. So I can go through and expand all the things like we did in the previous one. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to have to go through that again. You've seen that report. So let's go back to our SharePoint site here. Okay, and at this time, let's modify the web parts here. And Report Explorer, I'm going to go in Modify again. And under Connections, let's make sure that we've got this connected to the report that I want it to. There's my appearance. Report Explorer looks good. And under Report Explorer, let's do our down arrow here and make sure that everything looks the way we want it. I know what I left out. Let's go to the right here and make sure that we're going to demonstrate and use it the way we want it to. There, that looks good. So let's connect the two together. And making sure I've got everything connected here. I'm going to make sure I'm missing one step here. So let's go ahead and go back a step here and make sure I do this correctly. So I want to make sure my Report Explorer, I'm in the modifying mode of that. There we go. And it's not showing me a view display that it should here. So let's take a look, making sure I've got the right dialog box open here. There we go. Make sure I did connections. There we go. Now I'll show them in Report Viewer. There we go. So instead of modifying the report, I was one menu choice off there. So right below modifying share web part, as I go to configuration or connection, go to show report in, and I want to show it in Report Viewer. There we go. Now we got it. And click OK to apply those changes. And so now let's go down and modify our report viewer. So I click the drop-down box here, modify my web part there. And I'm going to modify my appearance for that one. And here I'm worried about height, not necessarily width. It'll take the default width of the Report Explorer we got up there at the top. So let's change this one to, oh, let's say 500 pixels. And click OK. I don't care about autocomplete. So Report Viewer is configured the way we want it to go. So let's go ahead and go back into AdventureWorks Sample Reports. And this time I'm going to take a look at this new report here called Employee Sales Summary, and just show you what that report might look like. So let's take a look. Notice my drop-down box here for employees, and let's take a look at Amy's information for the year 2003, and click on View Report. Okay, so now I'm all inside of SharePoint. There's the detailed sales report for Amy, and I've got my scroller bars automatically built in because we set the 500 and 600 pixels height and width. And I could actually drill in just like we could previously all the way down into the other reports, and I could print this from the print icon right here in the middle. All right, so that's what it looks like from the end user perspective. Let's go back to our slides for a little bit here. And so in that demonstration, we took a look at Report Server from just some of the new features that we've added from 2005. We took a look at, from the end user's perspective, what a running report looks like, and also how to configure in SharePoint Server to be able to use reporting services, connect to reporting services, and use some of the built-in reports that are there. All right, so let's get back to our agenda. Next, we're going to take a look at creating and publishing reports. And we do that with understanding the report lifecycle. This is a continuing cycle. There's 4 phases to this cycle: creating, publishing, delivering, and managing reports. Creating reports is all about defining what's in your report: the data sources, the queries, the filters, the grouping of information, how we aggregate it, how we add the information together, sorting, layout, look and feel, and so on. Publishing or deploying a report stores it in reporting services databases and makes it available to a wider audience. You can use the built-in tools for creating the reports, or you can use your own. The new report builder is focused on more non-technical end users who want an easy way to generate ad hoc reports. Report Designer, however, on the other hand, is a more robust designing tool. It's Visual Studio integrated for IT professionals and developers that know a little bit more about the underlying infrastructure of the data. In both cases, reports are defined using the report definition language, or RDL, which is a documented XML format. These files have an RDL extension on them. You can also build your own tools on top of XML format. Key message here is that third-party reporting format is open and documented, making it easy to integrate reports and build or use third-party tools with reporting services. All right, so let's go take a look at these tools. Again, enough with the slides. Let's go take a look more and have fun with the product. So in this demonstration, we're going to use Report Builder to create a report, run that report, and then add a filter to it. So let's go back to our demonstration machine I've got here, and let's restore that SharePoint that we've got. And maybe there it goes. And remember the SharePoint here exposed for us when we added in the Report Explorer, a link right here off the top of it to Report Builder. Now I could have gotten to Report Builder a number of different ways, but I'm just going to link to it straight from my SharePoint here. Okay, we'll begin by launching this, and notice it's done validation to make sure we're a good user. It's a click once application. It always checks to see if you have the latest version cached in your computer. When you first try to launch Report Builder, you're going to get this dialog box right here. What do you want to do? Yes, I want to run it. Or when an updated version is available, it will post it to the report server. You'll then prompt it to rerun the application, which means this is the newest version of it. So we're going to do a full download to this machine of Report Builder. In just a second, we'll see a Getting Started pane open up, and we can get going and building our first report. Here we go. All right, so notice this is kind of a blank page here, but it's pretty intuitive. So I want to select what do I want to connect to. So I expand my AdventureWorks. That's our sample database. And I've got several different choices here. I've got a table, columnar report layout, matrix, cross-tabbed, or chart. Those are the only three that come with Report Builder out of the box. So I'm just going to create a blank one here. Notice I've got some hyperlinks to help me open some other things from a file or from report services, previous saved ones. So I'm just going to create a blank new one. We're going to create a new report using the default table layout. The design service has some predefined areas for entering a report title and tabular data. It contains two fields to show the total number of rows in the table, as well as any filtered expressions to use. So notice here, I just click here to add a title. I drag and drop columns here, total information, and then any filters I might create. So you don't see a database diagram. So those of you that are DBAs and IT pros like myself wanting to understand all the underlying fields and how the tables are all related, this is designed for an end user. Okay? They know what the name of fields are, like sales, customer, employee. That's all they need to know. They don't need to care what table it came from or how those tables are related together. So we cover all that up behind the scenes with them in Report Builder. All right, so let's dive right into it and get to go into building one here. So I'm going to let's see, what do I want to do? I'm going to take a look at my entities, and notice as I switch entities here, my different fields change. Okay, so let's start off with this customer one. I have things like customer numbers, customer name, account number, contact ID, and notice all the way down here at the bottom, I've got a modified date. So let's expand modified date. Okay, so you can see all the information about the dates in a calendar format, month, day, year. We got also who's been modified, first time that data was modified, and the last time it was modified. So let's build a report that shows the information about salespeople. We'll summarize this data by sales territory. You can either start with the report details, that is, the salespeople information, or the report grouping. In this case, we're going to use territory. We'll start with the latter by simplifying double-clicking the sales territory entity. So instead of customer, I'm going to go to sales territory. And notice if I just double-click on it, it will go ahead and take the columns from that table, the most commonly ones we might want to use, name, sales, year-to-date, and sales last year, and drop those right on our report designer. Keep in mind that at this point the report is focused on sales territory data. You cannot add another table, and the only way to go back to the master list of entities is to delete the columns you just placed. All the data from this point forward must somehow be related to the sales territory which means you're working with the 5 roles remaining in the Explorer pane. Okay, so notice it's removed and only has a few lists of them here. Our report's about salespeople, so let's select the salespeople role and drag some of its fields to the design service. Excuse me. For this report, we'll start with adding the fields that make up the salesperson's full name. So let's click on salespeople. And on the fields down here, I want to come down and find first name. So I'm going to highlight first name. Now I need to get several fields. So notice this is very powerful. If I hit Shift key and then click on the last name, that's going to highlight all 3 of the fields, first name, middle name, and last name for me. So I can drag those as a group. So I click on that group and drag them out here to my design service. Now where do I want them to go? I'm going to put them here. Notice as I move things around, I get that little blue bar. So if I come just to the left of that blue bar, it's going to actually drop those 3 fields to the right of the blue bar. Watch as I let go of the mouse here. It added both, now we have territory data and salesperson data. Okay, so we have both the salesperson's information and first, middle, and last name, as well as the territory that they're part of. When you do this, the table shows that the newly added data is related to a different entity, which results in a different level of subtotaling. Now let's find territory here. And there's the territory. Notice the fields I've got in that. Let's take a look. I don't need all these fields. So let's get rid of this sales year-to-date. So I'm going to right mouse click and get rid of that. And I don't need this last year's information, so right mouse click and delete that. Okay. So next let's take a look at our sales orders. So click on the sales orders here. And I want to get number of sales orders. And so let's take that field and drag it out here. Again, I'm coming, notice the blue bar representation. And that should add it. It did. Notice when we added that, we get 2 levels of subtotaling and grand totaling here for us. Let's get sum total due. All right, so if I come, sum total due is all the way down here at the bottom, and I'm going to again drag it, and I want it out here in the last column. There we go. So make sure that blue bar is there before you let go. So I click on and release that, and so I now get a sum total due. If you have a powerful user, they can figure this out pretty quickly. So we're going to look at this sales-related data. It would be good to know the total number of orders for each salesperson. To do this, we've clicked on the sales orders. We've dragged that. Because this is an aggregate value, you'll see the aside from the new column. 2 rows are now added to the sales order totals. These rows are hierarchical arranged because the salespersons are grouped by territory. So there must be a subtotal of orders for all salespersons within that territory, as well as a grand total for all territory. We'll also show the sum total due for each order, which is also an aggregate value. So let's take a look at this total row here. Let's highlight it. And I want to change and show these results in a different color. So I'm going to highlight this whole row by a shift and click. So I get the whole row here. And let's go up to format. Oh, let's change the font. I always like sales numbers to be bright colors. So let's pick a nice bright green. Green means money. Let's bold it. We'll take it a couple of fonts bigger, because I always like to see the grand total numbers. There we go at the bottom. So that's going to change everything in the bottom row. And then notice I can resize things. So if I want to take this sum total due and drag it out, or I could drag the whole items. If I want to drag just this one column, I'll highlight it and drag it to fit and make sure that I get it to stretch out. There we go. Stretch out to fit the entire page. I know the number of sales orders isn't going to be that big, so I can shrink it down or bring it back. Okay, so you see you've got full control of the header information to make the columns and the fields as big or as small as you'd like. Haven't given my report a title yet, so I click on the area that says exactly this, click to add title, and we'll give this one My Sales People, the name of the report. So let's go ahead and run it. So I click up here on the Run Report button. The client calls out to the report server during the generation of this report to get all the data in real time. This process can take a few seconds. And then we'll have a report showing all the salespeople grouped by territory. That didn't take too long. Let's see how the salespeople perform in the Northwest Territory. So I drag down here and find Northwest. There's Northwest. The two columns on the right, their total number of sales orders and the amount total dollars for each salesperson. For example, a salesperson, let's see, David. Yeah, there's David Campbell, the top performer with 189 orders and looks like a little bit over $5 million. Total sales territory is shaded in blue, so Northwest Territory's got a total of $12 million. Also at the bottom of the information is the total number of salespeople in our report, as well as any currently applied data filters. Right now I don't have any data filters. Due to the current reporting format, it may not be relatively apparent all the aggregate values that support drill through, so you can click any of the aggregate values in the report that containing underlying data. So for example, under David Campbell, I can click on this 189. Watch what happens here. It then opens all the sales order headers for that one individual user. I can go to the bottom here. Oh, let's pick sales order 46098. Click on it. And I can see that individual sales order. Okay, pretty cool stuff. I didn't have to create all of these. Those are automatically generated for me. That one individual order was worth $51,000. Let's go back to our designing fashion and take a look at some of the changes we can do to that report. Notice I didn't have to put the up and down arrows, but when we saw that report, I could summarize information and scroll up and down to that filter. Let's create our own filter here. We may not want to see all the people or all the data for all the people or all the available data that's out there. So let's create a new filter. So notice the little filter button here. I'm in design mode and I click on filter. When you click on this icon, it opens a filter data dialog box that loads the same list of roles and fields. You can now use these to build a filter expression. Let's say, for example, we want to see just the orders in the year 2002. We'll select the sales order role and expand the order date field to reveal the order year value and then drag this to the design surface. So over here in the field data dialog box, we're going to take a look at our entities and we want to look at sales orders. So I click on sales orders here. And then in my field list I've got down here, I want to look at order date. So notice expand order date, and it's got lots of fields inside of there. And I want to take order year. So we're going to filter year 2002. So I highlight order year, drag and drop it to the design surface. And notice I've got lots of different operators here. So order year equals, and we're going to specify a specific year, 2002. And I want to drill down and look at specific months. We can also add this ability to filter on a given sales month. So here I'm going to take order date again, this time get order month, drag and drop it to my design service. Notice it defaults to an and. I could change that to an or. And I click on the equals. Instead of this equals to, I'm going to grade and put it into a list. And so far I haven't defined any values. For example, I only want the first 3 months of the year. So click on the no values selected yet, and I'll notice it represents the 12 months of the year. So I'm going to click 1, 2, and 3 to get January, February, and March, and click OK. Notice what this does to my design. My report is still designed the same with the same name, but notice down here at the bottom I've got a filter, sales order headers, with all order year equals 2002, order month in 1, 2, or 3. So let's run that report. Our data should change to reflect, as it did, only the data in the first 3 months of the year. Let's click on that filter again. This time I can modify that filter on the order month, so I'm going to click that one. And notice what I can edit as a formula, I can remove that condition, or what I want to do in this case is prompt. So when the end user runs this report, we're going to prompt them for the data entry. So click OK there. Now you'll notice when I want to be able to run it, what can I do? I can come out here and say, okay, not just the first 3 months, but let's add April, May, and June, so I get this report run as of, so let's click on View Report again. Goes out there and regenerates this for the first 6 months of the year. Okay, so I can very easily add user interaction to the report designer, allowing me to be able to expose more functionality Again, notice these drop-down boxes. I didn't have to program that. That was already built into the report as we created it. All right, so let's look at one more thing. Let's publish this report and view it in a report menu. So go up here to say File and Save, which opens up the Save As Report dialog box. And so we're going to save this into our AdventureWorks sample reports and give it a name. And let's call this one My New Report. Woohoo, something fancy. And click on Save. So we've saved it out there. So now let's go ahead and close the report builder. And let's go back to our report manager here. And go back to the home of AdventureWorks. And let's refresh that page. I think I got to go all the way back to the home. There we go. Now go into our AdventureWorks sample reports. And my new report should be showing here. I probably didn't save it in the right place. Let's see where we saved this one. I probably didn't save it in the right location. That's okay, but you get the idea. It would be shown on the list of reports, right underneath here on the bottom. And I probably didn't pull it into the right, save it off into the right directory, but it would be saved right under here in the bottom. All right, so let's go back to the slides for a few minutes. So in that one, we take a look at creating and publishing a report and working with SharePoint to design it. Next, let's talk about the second part of the report lifecycle. Report lifecycle allows us to be able to manage the reports and to be able to publish the reports. But next, let's take a look at what's it like to deliver those with a developer. This is where we get into the more robust development of reporting. So let's go back to our demonstrations and look at, instead of just report builder, let's look at report designer. So this one, we're going to take a look at report designer to create a report, run the report, and add a filter. So let's get out of the reports that we were looking at before, and this time I'm going to open up SQL Server Business Intelligence Design Studio. And I'm going to, when this opens, create a new project, and there are several different project templates that are out there. So let me go ahead and full screen this so you guys can see what I've got going on here. A couple different ways we can create our new project. I'm going to go to File, New Project, which will open up the different templates that are out there available to me. And I want to pick a report server project, which will open up in Visual Studio. Give it just a second here. There we go. So I want a report server project. Now, obviously, I could go through the wizards, but I'm not a wizards guy. So I just want to go in and create that template. So notice I've got on the Solution Explorer over here. As soon as this template loads, it should load up some of the things that we need to create a report server project. Let's add a new data source as soon as this comes up. My poor little external drive's working real hard here, so bear with us just a second. It's got to load Visual Studio. There we go. Okay, so notice I have Report Project 1. I haven't given it a name yet at this point. And I'm going to go to my Shared Data Sources. So if I right mouse click on Shared Data Source, it should be able to let me create a new data source for this project. So we're going to add a new data source. And that should open up, there it is. It's creating a new project data source for us. seems to be going pretty slow here, so bear with me just a second. See if I have something else conflicting with it. There it goes. Okay, so where do we want to connect? We want to connect to SQL Server. And we'll just call this one our local host. And what kind of connection do we want to connect to? SQL Server. And click on our Edit button. And our server here, we're just going to pick localhost instead of doing a drop-down box like I should have clicked there. I can do the two different SQL servers I've got running on my network here. I'm just going to do localhost. And now which database do we want to work with? And we're going to pick AdventureWorks. Oh, let's actually do the data warehouse. That'll be much better. There we go. So the data warehouse has got some more meaningful information. Notice it created our connection string for us, and we now have a data source to work with. So now let's go out and build our first report. So right mouse click on reports and tell it to do an add new report. And it's going to launch our wizard for us. Get rid of that wizard stuff for me. And so the first thing I want to do is, what is my data source? Tell you what, instead of doing it through the wizard, let me just go through and do this manually. I don't like the wizard, so let's just do a new item here. Instead of going through the wizard, let me show you what it's really like. So let's go ahead and do a new report here. There's our design surface. So what are my data sets? So I want to connect to a new data set. And it will, by default, go to my local data set number 1. So click OK there. I don't even have to tell it. Let's click on my little ellipse and tell it to work with AdventureWorks. Let's use the local host that we created in that previous connection. There we go. So it didn't connect to my data. Let's take a look at why it didn't connect to my data here. Let's try that again. So let's go to our data set, new data set, and I need to point it to AdventureWorks, and it's not picking up on AdventureWorks here, so let's try that. And check my credentials. Everything looks good there. And let's go ahead and edit that reference. That looks good. I'm even having a little bit of connection problems with my data cube. Maybe my cube is not currently online, so we'll come back to that. But you get the idea here, where I would be able to go in and pick up all the information from the data warehouse here and pull in the information into creating my new report. So let's talk about the differences between Report Builder versus Report Designer. I'm about to run out of time here. So who's the target for each one of these? Report Builder is designed for a business user, whereas Report Designer is for our IT professionals and our developers. Report Builders we saw is the ability to give us ad hoc reports, where we do managed reports in our Report Designer. Report Builder auto-generates the queries with semantic layer on top of the source, so we really don't care how the data is outlaid. Okay. Whereas in Report Designer, I can go write my own code in SQL Server, Transact SQL, Oracle, ODBC connectivity, and do my own queries in the reporting language of the database and utilize all of that for my report building. There's only 3 default templates that we've got in Report Builder. As we saw in Report Designer, we've got a free-form, nested, banded reporting capability. Report Designer is integrated into Visual Studio, allows us to be able to develop through the Business Studio Intelligence platform. We cannot pull the reports that are built in Builder into the Designer. We can edit Report Builder reports in Designer the other direction. Okay, so Designer reports, it's only one direction where we cannot do it the other way around. And we probably don't have enough time to do that last demonstration there, so let's go ahead and just kind of summarize what we've done today. We've introduced you to SQL Server 2005 reporting services. We've looked at creating and publishing reports through the Report Builder and delivering and managing reports through the Designer tools. Lifecycle Part 2, now that we've created them, we can use a pull model where users come in and connect to the data and run the reports on an ad hoc basis. One of the new features is the ability to do push model of reports. Like I mentioned earlier in the introductions, we use an internal system here to track what events I'm going to be doing and what webcast I attend. And so we have a report that runs off of our SQL Server database that this registration process is built on. And I've designed a report, and I've selected the push model. And so every Friday, that report runs, and it pushes it out to my email. So I know when on the weekends, when I go check my mailbox, it'll tell me what events I'm supposed to be attending during the next week. It makes it very easy. I don't have to go remember to go run the reports. So we can set all that up in reporting services. So the core enhancements, better integration together over previous versions of reporting services. We've got the new ad hoc reporting capabilities with Report Builder and integration with Visual Studio, allowing us to be able to pull and call things like Report Viewer and having controls of that from our applications. So for more information about Report Server, go out to microsoft.com/technet. If you want to see this particular webcast and links to it, it can be found at microsoft.com/technet/SQL-06. Okay, so if you have any questions, now's the time to go ahead and submit them in the queue. And if Keith and Brian haven't gotten to them all, I'll jump on here in just a second and help them answer any questions. So Aurora, I want to turn it back over to you. We'll take a look at what kind of questions are still out there pending.
Alrighty, thanks so much, John. So I will be providing the survey here in just 1 second. And for upcoming and previously live webcasts, you can visit microsoft.com/webcasts. And then we have a link there for you if you have any webcast content ideas or if you just want to contact us. So here's the survey. If you could just take a second and fill it out, we do appreciate any feedback and comments that you provide. And John, with that, was there anything else you wanted to address?
It looks like Keith and Brian have done an excellent job. I want to send out my thanks to them for all their help behind the scenes answering the questions while I was doing the demonstration portions of it. Looks like they've answered all the questions that were out there. So again, if you have any questions you think about later, don't hesitate to email me. It's john.weston@microsoft.com. And if you didn't have a chance to see all the questions that your peers asked during that period, the question and answer log, I'll strip out emails and personal names and that kind of stuff and post it up to my blog. And again, my blog is at blogs.technet.com/jweston. And again, I appreciate your attendance today, and thanks again to Brian and Keith for the behind-the-scenes help.
And I'd like to extend a special thank you to John for presenting today and also to Keith and Brian for answering questions. Thank you everyone for attending today's webcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's TechNet webcast. Thanks for joining us. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.